Okay.
Go ahead and start, and I want to take a moment and say thank you all for coming today. Kaisig is happy to have you here. This is Dr. Chris Ferrand. He works for Christ Community Health Services, and he's going to be presenting for us today.
Thank you for having me. Could I just get a quick, sense of what exposure everybody has had to ACT, so that way I sort of can kind of make sure that I meet the needs of the group the best that I can?
I have been to presentations on ACT and I've used some of the concepts in practice, but I've never been officially trained in it.
Okay, thank you. Is this going to be pretty new to the majority of you all?
I was going to say, I've just learned about it through my intro to counseling class. So it's very new to me.
Okay.
I've been to a few trainings and went to a conference, I guess last year when Kelly Wilson was retiring.
Awesome. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Well, shall I go ahead and get started then?
Dr. Ferrand, can you see the chat? Some people are answering there.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Now, Joy, are you seeing the right? Are you seeing my presentation?
Yes. Now it's on the right screen.
Okay. Okay, everyone. So today I'll be introducing you to the ACT model and ACT as a process-based therapy. I sensed that I might need to introduce the basic model and spend some time on that, quite a bit of time on that. So I'm going to do my best to get to the process-based part, but I want to do justice to the model at large, but hopefully we can get it all done. My invitation for you all today is to bring your presence, to bring an open heart, to be clear on your reason for being here today, to hold lightly judgments, evaluations, and beliefs about what can and can't be done and how things should be done. To hold lightly self-stories of what you can and can't do, and to be curious. And if you've been exposed to ACT, I'll ask you to bring a beginner's mind to the learning process. My commitments for today, to bring my whole heart to this next hour and a half, to be thoughtful and caring towards the work we will do together, to be bold, and I'm committed to being helpful to those in this training and those you'll serve, and to be intentional in slowing my pace and to breathe, even though I've bitten off possibly more than I can chew, but I'm going to try to slow down and to really be with you all. These are my goals and objectives. I also wrote some that were more behaviorally based to like an APA would like, but so you all know what my goals, my true goals are for you all, is to increase your sensitivity to psychological inflexibility and rigidity processes and flexibility processes within yourself, to increase your ability to read those processes in those you serve, to give you a sense of the spirit of the ACT work via walking through each rigidity and psychological flexibility process, and to give you a sense of how we might model and instigate these processes in the work we do, and to introduce you to process-based ACT. And if I have done that well, I'll lead you where you can learn more. There's much to explore with this model, so this will just be a taste. I'm going to give you a brief description of the ACT model, introduce you to the ACT hexaflex, walk you through the inflexibility processes with an invitation to self-reflect, walk you through the flexibility processes also with an invitation to self-reflect, introduce you to process-based therapy, and allow time to discuss. Likely there will not be time for experiential practices, though at the end I'll direct you towards a wealth of opportunities to learn ACT. So acceptance and commitment therapy is a transdiagnostic model developed in the 80s based on the common core processes thought to account for human suffering. It's meant to be broadly applied, and it's a part of the third wave of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's an empirically supported treatment. At this time, there are 413 randomized controlled trials as of October 2020. Strongest data for anxiety, depression, substance use, chronic pain, and transdiagnostic groups. APA Division 12 lists it with, for OCD, modest research support, chronic pain, strong research support, depression, modest research support, mixed anxiety disorders, modest research support, and psychosis, modest research support. So I won't be able to really dig deep into these given our hour and a half, but the foundations of the model are functional contextualism, applied behavior analysis, and relational frame theory. And part of the the way this is defined is an empirical principle-based approach that is sensitive to the context and functions of psychological phenomena, not just their form. Seeking the construction of broad, flexible, and effective repertoires over an eliminative approach to narrowly defined problems for clinicians as well as clients. At its heart, ACT is a liberation model. Part of the work is exposure-based, meaning that if we are to live with our whole hearts, we will make contact with private internal experiences. So our goal is not to feel better, it's to feel better, to get better at feeling. The goal is not elimination or subtraction, but rather improved ability to live with what we think, feel, remember, and sense. And in order for us to do that, we will need to loosen the grip of verbal dominance. And we'll need to stay oriented. We need directions that matter in which to move. And we need a strong reason to persist in those value directions. We need to know when we're moving towards or away. And we need to know what is workable as guided by values. And to do this reliably, we'll need to learn skills. And in ACT, we learn those experientially. So what we're trying to do is really step out of more languaging and minding and to really begin to experience the process rather than just talk about it. So you want to be mindful of when you find yourself talking about a process, but they don't really experience it before they leave. So rehearsal is good. And using what shows up in the room, it's an opportunity. So if something shows up, be glad. And it's a chance to sort of open the door to that process. So when we look at process-based therapy, specifically what processes. So we're trying to aim for psychological flexibility, which is defined as the ability to pursue valued life aims despite the presence of distress. Said differently, the ability to feel and think with openness, to attend voluntarily to your experience of the present moment and to move your life in directions that are important to you, building habits that allow you to live life in accordance with your values and aspirations. It's about learning not to turn away from what is painful, instead turning toward your suffering in order to live a full life full of meaning and purpose. So that's sort of the heart of the work. So inflexibility and rigidity are related to human suffering. And flexibility processes are related to human adaptability. And so this is the kind of what I wanted you guys to have access to. So I sent you that link, it's in the chat box. And so what you may want to do is keep this slide and the next one accessible. So whenever I talk about like this diamond, where you can turn the diamond and look at things in different perspectives, and I want you to be able to reference this quickly. So that's why I wanted you to have the slides, and I also wanted you to be able to focus so you didn't feel like you had to write the whole time. So I wanted you to be able to have those slides. So inflexibility, rigid attention toward the past and the future, and the mind is not present. The person is not clear about what they value. There's a lot of inaction or avoidant persistence. The person has a conceptualized self. They're sort of merged with their psychological content, and the self gets lost. And lack of ability to perspective take. And cognitive fusion, this is where a person has a kind of excessive verbal dominance over their behavior. The self gets fused with the thoughts. And then experiential avoidance. So all of those things are lead to psychological inflexibility, which again is correlated with suffering. So the model is, this is the psychological flexibility model. So contact with the present moment, so flexible attention, values, intrinsic meaning by choice, committed action, behavioral flexibility, being able to persist with behavior, even if we carry things that are difficult. Self as context, flexible perspective taking, and the ability to hold self stories lightly. And then cognitive flexibility. So we learn cognitive diffusion or cognitive distancing. And then emotional flexibility, the ability to open up to one's experience. And all of these things, you'll see they're interconnected. You see all those lines where if you open the door to one process, you very well may see another if you look. And so one way to look at this is those on the center and right side are the commitment and behavior change processes. And those on the left and center are the mindfulness and acceptance processes. That there's also been some new thinking on, if you put them all together, you have mindful action. So the 6 processes boil down to 3. And this has become a model called focused acceptance and commitment therapy, which is easily adapted to primary care behavioral health, which is what I do. And so the pillars of flexibility on the left side are open, the way that you would define that based on all the 6, and then aware, and then engaged. And this is another one I want you all to keep handy and to be able to reference. So another way to look at this is it's described by different people in different ways, but the same kind of general principles. So open, centered, actively engaged, or open, present, engaged. And so the 6 boil down to 3 that boil down to 1. And so as we look at this sort of diamond where you turn it and you see things in different ways, the idea is that So Steve Hayes, kind of suggests that at any point, at any time, you can go anywhere in the model and do useful work. In the Act 2 training, there's a hexadancing exercise where basically he pairs you up to practice, and one of you is the client, one of you is the therapist, and he puts a slideshow behind you or behind the client to where the therapist sees it, and it's rotating every 2 minutes. And your task is to kind of shift to that process. And he models it through demonstration. And it's really interesting how you can open the door to a process and turn it in different ways. But I hope that by the end of this, I can sort of show you what I mean by that. So before we walk through these processes, I'll just invite you to kind of get those ready, those slides that I mentioned to keep accessible. So I'm going to take you through like a walk through your experience. There's no requirement to share, but I'll invite you to look inward and kind of get a sense of your own flexibility and inflexibility processes. Remember, ACT suggests that these processes apply to both client and the therapist. There's an assumption that you have a mind and are vulnerable to the same psychological traps that they are. And so we're in this together, and there's less of a hierarchical relationship in the ACT therapeutic relationship, in the sense that we're not putting ourselves in an expert role. We're sort of there with them in this very kind of kind and present way. So past, present, and future, and thinking about where you're oriented. You could even stop right now and notice, are you present right now? Are you thinking about things that you need to do later on today? Or did anything yesterday happen that is troubling you? When you get quiet and you get present, what do you become aware of that is hard? And are there things that show up in the present moment that draw you into past or the future? Kind of tug away, that don't want you to stay present. The mind doesn't seem to like this. When you get present, what problems does your mind try to fix? And why is it so difficult for the mind to reside in the here and now? And so I'll give you all just a moment to sort of reflect on those questions, and feel free to answer if you like, no expectation. But I'll just give you a couple seconds.
Are you able to see the chat box for people that type in their responses?
I'm really not, but it's just because I'm looking at it with a different view, but I can always try to minimize the slideshow, but I'm afraid that if I do that, it's going to cause problems.
No, because I can read if anybody types in anything for you.
Okay. So anybody have anything so far based on this? More important than answering is just sort of self-reflecting.
For me, I think something that kind of draws me into past and future, just at this current present moment, is just honestly like everything going on outside, and like getting notifications about different things popping up. That kind of makes it difficult to always be present. And so yeah, I like close some tabs and put my phone on do not disturb. So, but yeah, that's what I immediately thought of.
Yeah, we live in a very busy world, absolutely, and certainly will not always be present, and that's why it's a practice. A practice of noticing and returning. Anybody else?
I have
I've got that. The last question is, it always gets to me. Why is it so difficult for the mind to reside in the here and now? Like, why is it so hard for me to be okay with what's going on right here and now? And hang on, baby. And yes, I'll get you one in just a second. And especially like even with my kids and stuff, like I'm here, but a lot of the time my mind is, I've got this paper to do, I've got to read this, I've got to do this, and then tomorrow I've got to do this, and then what's for dinner, and what time do I need to get them down for a nap, and you know. So why is it, I get stuck on that? Why is it so difficult for me to stay in the here and now?
Mm-hmm. So this is a good opportunity for us to notice kind of the mind's kind of judgments and evaluations, and how it even problem solves us. And so does anybody, I'm sure other of you relate to that. I remember the first time I tried to do some mindful sitting, I became very frustrated with myself because my mind was so busy and I had a hard time staying focused. I think that universally the mind struggles with silence, or it struggles to just sort of attend to one thing. Any other thoughts from the group?
We just had one in the chat box that said, sometimes it's hard in here and now because emotions pop up if I'm not so engaged in the normal work.
Gotcha.
Something that's made it easier for me in the past couple of days is that I've been working through a self-compassion workbook. And so that's helped me because in the past, being in the here and now has involved like self-criticism, which is very uncomfortable. But letting go of that a little bit has really made an impact just in a couple days so far.
Excellent. That's good. That would be a flexible response to those thoughts, you know, and one would have to notice them in order to hold them differently. So, okay, so if you get present, do you catch that chatter? And I think some of you are speaking to this, that stream of languaging that is the mind. So an ACT, you know, sort of a metaphor for language is the mind, your mind. And you can stop and notice your mind, which we'll get to. So there's a separateness between you and your mind. You're able to notice it. What hard thoughts do you sometimes want to get rid of? Do you experience thoughts that are held as literal truth? If you look back at the course of your life, have there ever been any lies you fell for and didn't even know it? And did that exert excessive control over your actions, having believed it? Now in ACT, we're not going to directly challenge thoughts like in traditional CBT, but you can be curious about them and you can relate to them differently, especially if you come to deliteralize them. Are there thoughts that seem to bully you, and do you sometimes try to make them stop, and does that work? Any thoughts on this one?
So I know just on like the school side of things, because we're all working on papers and such, there are thoughts that come across of, I'm never going to get this done. I'm never going to get it done well.
Mm-hmm. Very judgmental chatter. Just noticing the tone, right?
Right.
Now, just being aware of, again, just notice those, how they're sort of charged in these ways that are very judgmental, comparisons. So when we get to what does cognitive diffusion look like? That way we can be very aware of just noticing the quality of these thoughts. Looks like another comment came in, but it's dropped off my screen. So let me know.
Is when I am future oriented, I tend to have bullying thoughts of tasks I need to finish.
I'm sure that creates a lot of energy and feelings. And okay. Now, and are some of those thoughts about you? Are there experiences that have attached to you? Self-stories about what you can and cannot do and who you are. Experiences that have ended up defining you, such as I am a, or I am not good enough, or I am stupid, or I am a diagnosis. And how old is that? So you see here the diamond. When you look at something that is, this is, self stories, but they get fused to the self. And what do I feel at that moment? You see the acceptance. And then in order to notice the self story, you would have to be present. And if you looked and saw, what do I care about here? Whenever when this story shows up, what is it that is cared for? Might I see something that is valued? And when I buy this story, does it impact what I do? Behavioral flexibility. So do you guys see the diamond here? But I wanted you all to have that handout so you can look and see what I mean, how they're all linked to each other. And so what I open the door to, whenever a client or patient says something, I could go to any of those areas and potentially do useful work. And that's what that hexadancing shows. It's really interesting. Any thoughts on this one?
When you say how old is thought, does that mean like how long you've had these thoughts, or?
Yeah, so like a good question to ask somebody is how old were you when that thought first showed up? And you can sit there and were you this tall? And tell them to tell you how tall they were whenever you first had that thought. And just being aware that, that inside of us, sometimes there's a part of us that first felt that they didn't measure up. And we're not alone in that. That when you get into an ACT training, you'll see that we carry stories. And there's a theme, a thread across them all, which is generally some form of I'm not good enough. The stories vary, but it's some form of that. And many of us have it. And so there are exercises around this where we really, honor and humanize that and be with that. And also, sort of diffuse and apply all this stuff to it. So does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Gotcha. Now, of the room here, how many of us have a story? I don't expect everybody to admit that, but an I am story, I am not, or I am. And just notice, do you carry a story? And do those you sit with carry a story? Do those you love carry a story? And how do we hold that story? Anything else, y'all, before I move on? And I hope you guys receive my prompts in love, by the way. These are not me trying to push anything on you. I just want you to be curious and to just notice, is there anything, you may not have the same stories, but just to be curious, is there anything there? Experiential avoidance. What feeling is most difficult for you to feel? Are there thoughts, feelings, memories, images, bodily sensations that you tend to push away or reject? Over time, have there been costs in your efforts to be rid of your experience? And do they actually go away in the long term? Any thoughts on this one? Be curious, are you also in the same boat? Do you feel things too? Do you hold memories that maybe sting a bit? That things that maybe you saw that were bad on the eyes, things that happened that sometimes seem to, you just want to push it away, not think about it, distract. Are there feelings that are less, kind of like, I have certain feelings that I'm better at, but then there are other ones that are harder for me to sit with, and it's a ongoing practice for me to, when I make contact with that particular feeling. So you guys can let me know if you have something on that one. So Steve says, we care where we hurt, and we hurt where we care. So if you look closely, does your pain reflect your caring? Do you find that you have been moving towards or away from what matters most? Do you find that painful thoughts and memories sometimes pull you away from the path you seek? And when you are moving away from your values, do you get a sense inside of that? So I want you to kind of just think through, regarding the things that are hardest for me to sit with, is there something there that I deeply cared for, wished for, wanted, valued? And see if it isn't true. Any thoughts on this one? Do you ever feel you are moving in the wrong direction in an area of life that you care about? Do you find yourself on and off the pattern that you hope to construct? And how long do you stay gone? How quickly do you return? How quickly do you notice? Are there thoughts that keep you stuck? And are there feelings that you are avoiding that would be elicited by taking action in value directions? So an example of this is somebody sits with you and tells you that they loved cooking with their mother. That was their favorite thing to do. But since mom passed away, I can't cook anymore. I haven't been in the kitchen for 3 months. So in order to go back to the kitchen, you'd have to feel.
That kind of reminds me of a question you asked earlier. If there are any emotions that you push away? And I have worked with someone who would push away happiness because after like the loss of their parent, because they felt guilt when they were happy. And so that kind of reminded me of that.
Absolutely. And that fits with, Brene Brown's research on we can't selectively numb too, that sometimes when you numb sadness, you numb joy, and if you open your heart to the joy, you also have to allow the sadness, meaning that, they're inseparable, that that you can feel more than one way about something. And that can you open your heart to allow both as a practice?
I know for me, sometimes I'll avoid doing something that sounds really interesting to me if I don't know other people who are going to it. And I'm afraid I'll feel awkward, socially awkward. And so I won't do it. But then later I'll be looking back on things and I'll be like, oh, well, I wanted to do that thing. And look, now this person is an expert in this thing. And I was like, well, 5 years ago, I was planning to go do that thing, but I never did.
Absolutely. So the choice to embrace some awkwardness or anxiety. Yeah, to be honest with you, you know, I, for many, many years, have struggled with performance anxiety. And my first supervisor, after I got licensed, believed in me a lot. And she would just over and over again ask me to present. And I made the choice to say yes to the anxiety, to the fear of failure. And so every time I present, I'm basically saying yes, you know, because I want to share this work, you know, so making the choice to feel when it matters, you know, doesn't always feel good. And so, you know, as we speak right now, I'm doing my very best to embody, you know, letting it move through me, you know, and to hold lightly judgments of how I'm doing, and, you know, all that chatter, and to stay the course and to persist. And so it's certainly not comfortable sometimes, you know. So our siren songs are experiential avoidance, behavioral avoidance, and cognitive fusion or entanglement. So these are the siren songs of suffering. So kind of playing these out, cognitive fusion, language is thought to be a double-edged sword. So the ACT approach is built upon the idea that human language gives rise to both human achievement and human misery. And what we call psychopathology emerges from normal psychological processes as functions of how the mind works. And experiential avoidance, attempting to avoid, suppress, or eliminate unwanted private experiences, leads to an upsurge in the frequency and intensity of them. And so I put quicksand here. Some of you that are older may recognize this movie. Sometimes the harder you fight with something, you dig yourself deeper, you know, it grows. It may not grow as fast as quicksand, but sadness can morph into despair. Anger can turn into rage, you know, and lack of contact with personal values. The damage done is that our most important life choices come to be based on how not to evoke distressing personal content, rather than moving toward what we most deeply value. And so life gets really small. So what happens is our behavioral repertoires get smaller and smaller. So the variety, the variability of what we do gets smaller and smaller in effort to not feel or elicit any type of psychological content. And so in ACT, what we're trying to do is increase behavioral variability and to expand behavioral repertoires and to give people the skills to be able to do that. Okay, so pausing there. Any thoughts or reflections or questions or anything like that?
I have kind of an unrelated thing. Could you put the link in the chat again? Because I switched from my phone to my computer and I don't have the link for the Google Docs. So
I'm putting it for you.
Thank you.
Joy, thank you. Okay. Anybody else? And a quick check-in. I'm curious, are you all with me? For those that may not be, you know, speaking, just sort of a quick check-in on your presence.
So There's a message in the chat that said the slide where it said your caring reflect the pain. Is that caring towards others or yourself or both?
Well, so in terms of the things that we care about, you know, like, you know, the things that hurt the most in life, usually there's something there, and it could be a person, it could be something that used to be valued. So for example, if you really loved your job and you lost it, or you previously felt really safe in your job and then all of a sudden it felt toxic, something was lost you cared about. If you really loved somebody and lost them, you know, your hurt reflects your caring. And, you know, it could be that, you know, a person cares about the golden rule and treating people kindly, and that their pain is a reflection of how that is not being met. It really could be a variety of things. If you look into the pain and see, is there something that this person cares about, some that's not being met or that has been lost? But that could be a person, or so as far as yourself, you know, I'm trying to think through how that might apply to the self, the things that hurt about us. So for example, I'm not good enough. Well, for me, you know, I do value competence. You know, I value contribution. I value, you know, like being able to do a good job and be dependable and reliable. So if I fail, then, you know, I cared about what didn't happen. So hopefully, does that make it a little bit clearer?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Let me know if any other questions come up, Joy. You can let me know. Or yeah. So, all right. This one right here, guys. So if you're listening, this is one that I really think is important. You know, as you sit with people, ACT is best done when you are psychologically flexible. So it's better to do as you say rather than say what to do. You know, so for example, if pain shows up, if they sense that you'll avoid it, they'll rescue you. So we've got to open up to our own feelings in response to their pain. We need to model flexibility through, you know, embody it. And so that's why, you know, ACT applied to yourself is going to be helpful. You know, like, you know, if you tell somebody, would you be willing to feel that, but you're not willing to feel something in your life, you know, you might lose a bit of authenticity, and it might be harder for you to really be authentic in that recommendation. So this is one that I really do try to practice, you know, and I think it's important both in my personal life and in the room. They'll rescue you. They will save you from their pain. And, but if you're willing to be there and willing to make contact with it and not immediately rescue them, you know, but to be with that and to use it as an opportunity to work through. Let me know if I need to clarify any more on that. So the functional alternatives are, you know, the alternative to fusion is diffusion or cognitive distancing. And the preferred alternative to experiential avoidance is experiential acceptance. To make powerful life choices, enhancing choices in service of personal values and workability. So this is what we're trying to aim for. Okay, y'all, so this one, really see if you can kind of give this some thought. This requires that clients have the courage to stick around when painful stuff shows up. And doing this reliably requires psychological skills. Standing still when painful thoughts or feelings show up is a skill. Staying focused on the present moment in daily life is a skill. Connecting with deeply held values and acting on those values, even though doing so is likely to produce some pain, is also a skill. So I'll give you a moment to kind of marinate on that. Now, this next one, I want you to really, I asked you earlier to monitor your, hold lightly your beliefs about what can and can't be done. Imagine that you believed this. When people stop suppressing and stop checking out of life, they tend to get better. I sat in on a focused acceptance and commitment therapy training, and he went through research on rapid response literature. And he basically suggested the person in front of you could be a rapid responder. They may not, but they could be. And if certain functional changes were met and made, rather, what if their life could expand quickly? It doesn't always happen. But imagine that you were curious enough to be present with that and thought this could person, if the right changes were made to the way that they relate to this, that they could be a rapid responder. And imagine that if you had that mindset. Any thoughts on that? Imagine you were the person and your therapist believed that about you. So you notice the perspective taking there, by the way. I just modeled perspective taking in one instance. But notice that though. Imagine that your therapist sort of believed in you that way. They believed you could be a rapid responder. They believed that if certain changes were made, that you could get better. And you know, what implications does that have for the therapeutic alliance?
So in the chat box, somebody posted that is related to the, if you're numb from the pain, you can't feel the joy too.
Right, right, yeah. Now, just a quick check-in, you know, healthy dialogue about this is welcome. So if, you know, I'm not trying to be the holier than thou, I know best. All I wanted to do was introduce a perspective. And then I wanted you to think through, you know, what would that mean if I was curious like that? And if I believed that this was possible? And then to really think through, what would it feel like to be a client and to have somebody believe that? So that's all I'm asking you to do. This is really that invitation.
Isn't that something that, I mean, that's what we should be thinking. And that's what our therapist should be thinking. Like, I thought that was just a common thing that, like we are, I guess, hopeful that our clients are like that, or.
Well, I mean, how many, yes, believing in people. What I'm suggesting is so what Kirk Strassel talks about is that if you believe that this is going to take a long time, then they may oblige. You know, they may believe that too. And so this therapy is going to take a long time. You're going to have a lot of sessions and you're going to have to come every week. And if they believe that, because you believe it, but what if you believed that change could happen quick? What if you believed that if certain changes happened? And you know, so that's kind of one thing that I think might shift the perspective a little bit. And then two, you got to wonder, are there very many therapists out there that are, you know, promoting distraction and avoidance? you know, trying not to feel things, and if so, is that different than this? Meaning that, you know, it's not that, I don't think it's that uncommon for people to promote, you know, kind of avoidant behavioral repertoires. Just to, I mean, remember, this is just one approach. As I say that, I realize it's not coming out like I wanted to, because my aim is not to judge other approaches. I guess that when I wrote this, my aim was really to get you thinking about rapid change. So what I'll do is I'll kind of take a breath, acknowledge that my last thought wasn't the best one that I've had, and then extend myself a breath of grace, and then kind of come back to presence. Is that fair?
Well, I had a thought about that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I was thinking, like, in certain instances, it could be that something that you would say if you were coming from an approach, like this could be a person who responds rapidly. It might, and hopefully we always have that kind of hope, but maybe sometimes it waxes and wanes. But maybe like something you say could really instill hope in the client that would make them say, whoa, if I just did this and this, like maybe I really could shift some things that would create a momentum that could create fast change. I was just thinking, like, something that having that mindset might shift something you would say or recommend in a way that could set things in motion to really create hope and a change. So I was kind of tracking along with what you were saying.
Okay, well, good. Well, hopefully you guys got the heart of that. Again, they're not all going to be rapid responders, but it's very interesting because I really did take what he said and was curious and tried to be very much aware of that and believing it, that if people make certain changes, that it could make a big impact. And my experience has been that, you know, that does happen sometimes with just the smallest of changes.
In the chat, it was written, it reminds me of the saying of believe it into existence.
Yeah, very nice. So kind of when we're going to be working towards practicing an open heart, in order to open your heart, you need to kind of turn towards rather than away. Most people by nature turn away. They distract, right? And so when you turn towards, you want to be able to notice and name, which is a practice that's suggested by polyvagal theory. But being able to sort of name your experience, you know, and a way to look that through is naming your teams, your thoughts, emotions, your action urges, memories, and sensations, being able to label those. You know, I'm having the thought that, or this is the feeling of sadness. That lets you know what you're opening up to. Dan Siegel, the author of Whole Brain Child, calls it sifting. He just uses different content there, but the idea is the same.
There's a comment of holding the possibility as a therapist is positive modeling for our client.
Yeah. Having looked, what will your posture be? So a question that you can do is, you know, ask somebody, you know, if you were at your worst with this issue, if you could make your body a statue that would let somebody know that experience without words, what would that be? And then secondly, when you're at your best on this issue, if you could make that a statue. So the terminology open heart or a closed heart, that comes from Kelly Wilson. The idea being that acceptance comes with so many, you know, meanings attached to it, that, you know, but people can kind of understand an open heart versus a closed heart. So it's just a language that you can use other than accept. And looking at your experience, are there costs to a closed heart? Does it work in the short term? Oftentimes, yes. It works really good in the short term. In the long term, what happens? Does it eventually come back? Does it come back smaller, the same, larger? Has that impacted how you want to be in your world? You know, the type of dad or mother you want to be, wife or husband or brother, sister, friend, student, educator. Has there been a cost to that? And being very curious, not judgy, not now is this working for you? Not like that. Very curious and gentle. Do you think it can work? What if this was a rigged game? What if that hard thought, feeling, memory, it hurt, but it did not harm? A good metaphor for this, you know, kind of an analogy would be like with chronic pain. A person can be hurting, but it's not harming them. At other times, they could be causing harm, meaning like if they overdo it, it could cause harm. But when it hurts, it's different than harm, fundamentally. So what if that hard thought, feeling, memory, it hurt, but it didn't harm? And what if the rejection of our experience was the toxic process? What if it's a trap? What if it can't work? Could it be that the difference lies in how we relate to it? In a world where you could choose, if these hard thoughts or feelings or memories or images were not an issue, what would you do? And notice the do, because people will say things, well, I'd be happy. You can pivot this to, well, if you were happy, what would you be doing? And you can keep on rolling with that until you get actionable steps. How would you be? You know, values as qualities of being and doing. You know, how would you be as a student, an employee, a friend, a son or daughter? And if something could grow from things fallen, I read an article by Kelly Wilson on that showed these nurse logs, and these trees will fall and trees will grow on top of them. So imagine if something could grow from things fallen. And if your life was a garden, what would you want to grow? And so Kelly talks about practices. Now, I've added a lot of his practices. I've also added some that, you know, kind of I've added, but this is one that was his, but growing valued patterns. Now, a quick note on values, they never end. They, you know, like kindness is a value for me. If I'm kind today, I'm not done with kindness. Check it off, you know, goal, you know, it's done. I don't have to be kind again. Kindness extends forever. I'm not always going to be kind. And so it's a pattern. I'm practicing this and noticing when I'm being unkind. In the same way, I'm a learner. So I'm done with school, but I love to learn. And so that's not ending. It doesn't end. It goes on and on forever. It's like heading east. And all along the way, there could be goals along the way, like landmarks on a map. And so some people are going to have a hard time knowing what their values are. And so a quick way to find that out are these 4 ways. Who are your heroes? What are your sweetest moments? What chapter would you like to write next? And what does your pain tell you about what you care about? These are all from Steve Hayes. If you get out into life, what is likely to show up? So if your life was a garden, we might see birds and bugs and, you know, snakes and all these things. So if there was hurt and no harm, and if a wiser part of you sensed that this was the wiser way, would you be willing to turn towards? to notice and name your experience, and to practice an open heart. And could we get to a yes? You know, we've been saying no. We've been saying no. And we're paying a price for that no. It pays really well in the short term, but not so much in the long term. In the smallest of steps, could you get to a yes towards your experience? And could you gently carry that experience with you if it meant your life would open up in some way? If that feeling were a wave, could you stay with it and ride it? Now you'll notice I'm using a lot of metaphor, which helps to jump out of that verbal languaging, that mindiness, that problem-solving mind. So we're sort of, you know, kind of balancing out that mindiness by using a metaphor. And then we can, in the present moment, process that. What's showing up for you now? As I even suggest opening up to that. What are you noticing? If you drop out of your head and into your body, what do you become aware of? Could you make room for that? And what do you notice your mind telling you right now? And that allows a person to be aware of their thoughts. So we're sort of cultivating these processes all, you know, in a conversation. And when the mind is in the past or the present, do you notice that happening? And what hurts that your mind is trying to fix or solve? And if you came back to this moment, what would you have to let go of? The answer to that, by the way, is control. That's the control agenda. There's an illusion that we can control our internal world. Do you notice that happening? And how do you get back to this moment? The practice, 5 senses and breath. Those are very quick ways to get back to the here and now, because your senses and your breath, this breath right here, right now, is only happening now. And the 5 senses are happening right now. If you get back to this moment here and now, does your mind pick it back up? Do you notice when you've picked it back up? So the practice, noticing and returning over and over. Present moment awareness. Do you find yourself reacting without pause? And so the practice is pausing and, you know, dropping the sensory anchor. And our practice is to decrease reactivity and increase choice making. So if we can kind of move from reacting to responding mindfully with openness, awareness, and active engagement, then we know we're moving in the right direction. So presence, y'all, is an anchor for the other two. So remember those pillars: open, aware, engaged. So the middle pillar is an anchor for the other two. So, you know, to be conscious and aware of that which is thought, felt, sensed, and remembered with choice to practice openness and distancing. Able to notice and name experience, able to open up to emotion. When you stuff things, it tends to get stuck and grow. But if you can open up, it can move. So notice that emotion, motion, moving. So if we can open up to it, it can actually move. The catch, though, is that it can come and go if you treat it that way. So the person has to be willing to let it come and go, not with the expectation that I'll open up so that it'll go away, because that will undermine the workability of it. So sometimes you have to revisit that issue of whether they're trying to use this to control. We want people to be able to very quickly pivot from a closed heart to an open heart. And so you can ask people questions like, is your heart closed or open right now? And then they stop and think about it. It's closed. So we have an opportunity to practice. And can they notice the difference? So if you get present and you decide to drop the rope, how might that free up your energy and attention? So notice, like right there, that monster is still on the other side, but now there's not a fighting with, and person can notice other things. If you could let go of fighting with your experience and notice that letting go, could you trust yourself? And could we try that now? And you can start real small. Like, would you take your foot off the brakes for 2 seconds? And for those 2 seconds, you get to choose when we do that and for how long and where we do that. But you have to go full willingness, full open heart for those 2 seconds. So presence is an anchor for embracing the sweet and the sad, and how they are connected and inseparable, like two sides of a coin that can't be separated. Love and loss. Conscious and aware of what is deeply cared for is a life source for this feeling. To practice contact with the richness of the present moment, keeping in mind that there's as much life and richness in a moment of suffering as in a moment of joy. And so can we be present and aware to the richness of that moment? Do you ever feel you're not present with activities or others? And can we practice awareness of the unfolding moment while engaging in what matters? And be aware of whether we're moving towards or away, and using values as your true north. So practicing a conscious choice to feel in this moment when in service of something that deeply matters. And if you ever watch this video, if you Google YouTube, Arthur and Diamond Dallas Page, it's a really good video. It's not that long. Would you be willing to allow that feeling if it would allow you to do something that deeply matters to you? So the choice to feel happens in the present moment. And as you make your commitments, can you create a pattern, noticing when we're off and returning to the pattern with gentle persistence, with presence, connection, attunement, vitality, and a sense of meaning and purpose in doing so. So the practice here is noticing and returning to valued patterns. And when we get present and move in directions that matter, thoughts tend to show up. So can we practice holding those lightly? And you can actually use apt physical metaphors for this. Actually keep objects in your office and have them hold it. Can you practice catching thoughts in flight, being aware of them, noticing them? And can you practice stepping back and getting some distance? So some of the mindfulness exercises might have them watch their thoughts, like leaves on a stream, or like you're overseeing a highway and watching your thoughts on the traffic, or thoughts as clouds, or a parade and putting your thoughts on placards. And can we practice looking at our thoughts rather than from our thoughts? So sometimes thoughts get right up on us, like the picture on the bottom. You know, we don't even notice the process of thinking. The thought merges to us, I'm not good enough. And can we sort of step back from them and observe? So, you know, you can use techniques like have them actually say, I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough. I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough. And actually rehearse this. They can write it down, different things like that. And then from there, you go from the bottom guy to the top guy, where you're looking at your thoughts. I'm having the thought that. And notice the space between the little guy and his glasses. There's a little space between. And that little space between allows for choice making. If we can create some distance, we can make choices. And then the practice of, is this thought helpful? And does it move me towards or away from my chosen values? And practice noticing word prisons. Now, these are words that tend to be pretty sticky. Can we catch those? And I've got that in your slides. Practice treating your mind as an advisor or a consultant. With a consultant or an advisor, you choose whether you want to take some of their advice or all of their advice. Imagine that you could thank your mind for that advice and make your own choice. So something that differentiates ACT from traditional CBT is we alter the function of thoughts, the way they function, not the form. So we change how the thought functions via a variety of cognitive diffusion skills, which, and I'll provide you resources to sort of really learn all of those. So why? There's no delete button, no subtract, only add. The nervous system doesn't work by subtraction. And that, by trying not to think about it, you tend to increase the frequency. So an exercise you can do is, for the next 30 seconds, don't think of a pink elephant. So, and you, when that story or narrative shows up, does it get right up on you, or is there some distance? And does that story about you impact the choices you make and how you treat yourself? And do you push that away? And how old is that story? And that choice comes with some decisions. Will we integrate that experience as a part and not the whole? And what will our posture be towards that experience? Can kindness be a practice? And can we provide dignity to suffering? That's a picture of my beloved mother, who we lost in 1994. Kelly Wilson mentioned that some bells can't be unrung. So nobody can save me from that. That bell cannot be unrung. And so I have a choice. How will I relate to that experience? And do I care about her? Do I wish she could know my kids? So would I be willing to open up to that? Would my life be better? Will I be a better dad, a better husband if I am willing to open up to that? So we want to practice observing experience. I'm the experiencer, and this is my experience. I am the feeler, and this is a feeling. I am the thinker, and this is my thought. I am the rememberer, and this is a memory. So you're not that. If you are noticing, you're not that. So stop and kind of wiggle your toes a little bit and notice the sensation of your feet on the ground. And notice yourself noticing that sensation. And if you are noticing that sensation, you're not that. You're noticing a sensation. So you're separate from that. And if you notice your mind thinking thoughts, or you notice a memory, there's a you there, a conscious observer that is able to notice. And these labels, are you your trauma? Are you what happened to you? Are you your diagnosis? Are you your failures? Or is there a you there that contains those? there's enough space. So notice if you look out your own window, you see that the sky is quite vast, and that there's been a lot of history in the sky that's right outside your window right now. And if you notice, the sky is still intact, that it's contained storms, but the sky is still there, and that the sky was not defined by Hurricane Katrina. It was an experience, but it didn't define it. The sky is still there. There was enough room to contain it, and it was still intact, and it was undefined. What if your consciousness was like that, but we didn't know it until we noticed that, that there's enough space inside, and that it's safe. This part of me is safe, undefined, undamaged, able to hold, strong enough to hold that experience. And as you practice perspective taking, can you notice the I, the you, the we, the here, the there, the now, the then, and practicing many perspectives, and being able to hold self-stories lightly and to practice perspective taking. So merging it all together, if hard thoughts, memories, or feelings were not of issue in a world where you could choose freely, what actions would you take? And what thoughts, feelings, and memories might you have to carry with you to keep those commitments? And in the presence of distress, can we gently and kindly persist when something matters enough? If you imagine someone you loved with your whole heart, so built into the ACT model is self-compassion. If you were to map self-compassion onto all of it, you would be able to do that. And so, imagining someone you loved, a little person perhaps, and, remember that thought earlier about you, that I am thought. If you were to imagine that you were looking that little person in the eye and you heard them say that, how would you treat them? And if you were to stop and argue with them and say, no, here's why you are good enough, and here's why. Remember, they have a mind, and the mind's going to, left to its own devices, treat you as a problem to be solved. So it's going to say, yeah, but I did this, and this. Oh, I know, honey, I know, but it's no, remember, no subtract. So if you could look that person in the eye and give them your presence, your safety, your acceptance, non-judging. If you could look them in the eye and give them a word that might hold them through, or give them a hug, or what might you say, or how might you be with them? And now the harder thing is imagining earlier on, how old is that for you? And if you could bring that younger you to mind and imagine looking him or her in the eye. What if you could treat her or him? What if you could treat yourself like you would that little person? Is everybody still with me? It looks like it might be frozen. Oh, okay, y'all are still with me. All right, so good. All right, so remember that they're all interconnected. And so here's the honest truth, is that I truly did bite off more than I could chew. We're at 12:20. So I'm not going to enter into the process-based therapy stuff. I can give a very, very quick overview just to give you a sense of what we're going for. And actually, that's what I'll really quick do. Basically, what you're going to do is pay attention to the overarching ongoing process in motion, the therapeutic space. You're going to pay attention to the interpersonal, what is happening between us, and the intrapersonal, what is happening within me. And so that's the ACT model of a therapeutic relationship. So all of this stuff is happening between you. And so we really want to tune into that. And the idea is to catch the process in flight happening between you. And then if you choose a process to work with, open the door to that process. And then you can use a method and then examine how did that work and then recycle it if you need to. But there's a constant flow, a moment by moment unfolding of these processes. You know, you can watch people's nonverbals, listen for the function and the process that's happening. And so really just noticing how you're impacting them, they're impacting you. There's a bidirectional mutual shaping. And you can watch for new behaviors that signal flexibility and sort of really try to catch that. So you grab a slice of behavior in the space between, you work with that in the present moment. So we want to get really good at recognizing processes and to be able to read those and to open the door to those, all while maintaining the therapeutic relationship. In ACT, it's really important to not use a method just because you think you're supposed to. Oh, well, you know, like for example, well, I used the chessboard metaphor because I thought I was supposed to, but it didn't really match a process. So you really want to match what you're doing based on what is happening. And by the way, this is a movement beyond the protocols and manualized movement. Those things are useful in the sense of that, you know, they inform research and certainly they push you into parts of the model that you might be uncomfortable with, maybe because you don't understand it well. So they're useful, but this new processed movement is much more flexible and fluid and much more like this that you're seeing. And so this flow of what's happening within you and how you can use that. Oh, so the interpersonal is that what's happening within you and how you can use that in the room from an open and aware and engaged space. So interpersonal, intrapersonal, tuning into all of these processes, and a couple of other things just that I can pretty quickly get to is tune into the balance of you know, kind of the triangle. Is there too much client and not enough therapist, or is there too much therapist and not enough client? Is there too much intervention? And so we can tune into, is this balanced? We can tune into function. So for example, the function of behavior may not meet the eye. So like you look at that hand there and let's say it was waving. Well, a waving hand could function as a signal asking for somebody to stop. A waving hand could also signal stretching your arm. It's a totally different function, same behavior. And so we want to watch for how things are functioning, such as, is this functioning as avoidance? We want to be sensitive to context, you know, that behavior is embedded in context. And also that there's an ongoing process of creative hopelessness. A lot of people think that you do this at the beginning and you're done, but the control agenda keeps coming up over and over again. And so those are some of the kind of processes that you can tend to in the present moment. I realize that this doesn't do it adequate justice, but at least you'll get a taste. So key skills for process-based ACT and CBT: get yourself centered, read and formulate key processes, open the door to an area, use a method, purposefully recycle based on the impact. In your slides, there is the ACT therapeutic posture. These are really good. I'm not going to go through them right now, but I would encourage you to read them. It'll give you a really good sense of the spirit. And for those of you that want to learn more, Praxis continuing education training, especially when they have live trainings, they have a lot of like boot camps. So I went to a boot camp when I was a pre-doctoral intern, and it was pretty low cost. I went for like a 3-day training for $300 at the student rate. Steve Hayes has an ACT Immersion online course. And then as far as books go, if you want to apply ACT to yourself, A Liberated Mind is Steve's newest book. And so it would, be a book that would kind of get you oriented to the model better and also allow you to apply it to yourself. There's the seminal text, the second edition of the ACT book, and then Learning ACT second edition is a skills training manual that's very solid. So those would be, if you want to learn more, and then there's an online Learning ACT resource guide. So, that brings us to the end. I'm sorry, guys, that I had to rush through. I really hope that in spite of that, you all got something out of today that maybe will bless your life and the lives of those that you come across, and that you feel that you got a good representation of ACT and a good sense of that, and that too, you know where to go to learn more. So that being said, I'll open up the floor to questions.
If you stop screen sharing, you'll be able to see some of the comments as well.
Okay. Okay.
Are you able to see the chat now?
I am. Mm-hmm. So as far as anything that you all would want to share that stood out from you today, if you don't have questions, anything that really kind of you extracted from today that, by the way, you can, integrate ACT into your existing orientation, with exception of, the cognitive part, but just kind of a check-in to see, do you all have anything that you sort of stood out to you?
The question I wrote down that I think stands out to me is the question that says, does your pain reflect your caring? Because that's something that I think is so true, and something that I could reflect on. So that really stood out to me.
Awesome. And do you feel like we gave you the clarity that you needed on that?
Yes, for sure.
I like the slide where, sorry to jump in. Did you want to finish talking?
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
Sorry.
No.
The look at versus from thoughts. I like that. As you were talking about it, I was thinking, what does that do? What does that do? And you explained it. And so it was, I like that, creating the space between. I just like that. That's what stood out to me.
Awesome. An example of that, by the way, is if you think about this, looking at, is there really a subtract? Within me, I've had the thought basically that I am not good enough. I'm not as smart, or, all these kind of thoughts that I've had. And you could show me every achievement that I've ever had, and my mind still has that thought. There's not a delete button. So I can go in and challenge it, dispute it, but it still comes up from time to time. So rather than argue with it, try to get rid of it, try to replace it, you know, it's all in how do I hold it? Am I able to get some distance from it? And am I able to notice it as a thought that functions as part of the problem-solving mind? And am I able to appreciate that I'm not the only one with that thought? You know, and am I able to offer myself self-compassion? Am I able to open up to the feeling associated with it? And am I able to be clear about my values when that thought shows up? And can I move towards my values when that thought shows up? So you see how the subtractive nature of this is sort of why we don't bother, and we look at them and hold them differently and use methods to diffuse and distance so that choice making can happen. Whereas, you know, if I buy the thought, I'm not good enough, I certainly wouldn't be doing this presentation. So, all right, so the perspective taking and understanding that a feeling or thought does not define you stood out to me, okay? Awesome. Any feedback for me on the format? So if I were to deliver this again, do you all have any guidance for me on how to move it from good to great? I think the hour and a half is the hardest part, just because it's so full and rich that, you know, I want to do it justice, but there's so much there. So any feedback you guys can give me, you know, about how to help me serve others better. Okay, fewer slides, longer pauses for responses. Sweet. Gotcha. So the never-ending story was tough. You know, when I saw that, I wondered. So that's good feedback. It was sad. Did I go at a slow enough rate that you could track me? Okay, sweet. So maybe slow down just a little bit more, chisel down the slides a little bit more, and that would help me to move along the continuum from good to great. Well, thank you all. If you ever need anything, feel free to email me. I'll put it in the chat box. Or call or text if you guys have any needs as far as if there's any way that I can be of service. Oh, okay. That's up to Joy, I suppose.
Yes, Fallon, we're going to make it to where it's going to be accessible. I just have to figure out exact form to do that.
Awesome. Appreciate you all. And, you know, I'm a huge kind of nerd on this stuff. So if you ever need anything, you know, I'm happy to help. And I've been supervising some of y'all's students and, you know, so, you know, work at Christ Community at our Fraser Clinic. And so just, you know, give me a shout if you need anything. And otherwise, you all have a blessed day. You all have the slides, right? You need them. Do you need me to send them out again, or are we good?
I think we can send them out. And I just wanted to say thank you for like taking the time out of your Saturday to come talk to us. And I know all the students are very grateful. And thank you, Joy, for setting this up. I don't think we've had a presentation on ACT, so this is a great opportunity for us to learn a lot. So I'm really appreciative.
Awesome, awesome. Well, if we ever do anything else, if I had 3 hours, we could just, you know, have rich conversations and do experiential exercises, because there's so much good stuff. But you know, an hour and a half is what it is. An hour is even worse.
if we get in person again, maybe we can schedule a real, session where we have the time for that experiential as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, y'all. Well, I'll see y'all later. Have a good Saturday.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Bye-bye.